DNA test results of an African American, myself, and historic ties to Igboland. Right now, I'm showing my old ancestry DNA result showing the estimate they originally gave me for Nigeria. Originally, they said I was 46% Nigerian, and they said your ethnicity estimate is 46%, but it can range from 36 to 56%. They later updated it, and it went down to 40%. Your ethnicity estimate is 40%, but it can range from 27 to 47%. And they gave a write-up on the Igbo, which that happened to be one of the uh, tribes I found I matched through cousin matches. The Igbo people are another large and influential ethnic group in Nigeria, with a population of about 30 million. They are found primarily in southeastern Nigeria, as well as Cameroon, Sierra Leone, and Equatorial Guinea. The transatlantic slave trade also had a massive impact on the Igbo. Many of those sold into slavery were kidnapped or captured as prisoners of war. Others were debtors or had been convicted of crimes. Several scholars assert that Igbo slaves were reputed to be especially rebellious. Some would even commit suicide rather than endure enslavement. Elements of Igbo culture can still be seen in former New World societies. For instance, Jamaican Creole uses the Igbo word for you, and a section of Belize City is named Igbo Town after its Igbo inhabitants. In the United States, a high concentration of slaves in Maryland and Virginia were Igbo, and their descendants still make up a large proportion of the African American population in the area. Right up on Nigeria. Nigeria, primarily located in Nigeria, also found in Benin, Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Togo. Okay, so now this is Frank Nolan. This is one of my ancestors. If you have an ancestry account, you can find resources such as federal census, draft cards, marriage licenses, death certificates, and so on. So Frank Nolan was born in Kentucky. His father's birthplace, Virginia. Mother's birthplace, Virginia. James Imlob, another ancestor. Father's birthplace, Kentucky. Mother's birthplace, Missouri. These are the Igbo relatives I found on Ancestry DNA. I crossed out their first names for privacy, but Obiojunwa, Ekwim, Okeke, Ononye, Olisa, and Abel. This is another write-up. This is not from Ancestry DNA, but this is another write-up. So many Nigerians. Why is Nigeria overrepresented as the ancestral genetic homeland of legacy African North Americans? In 1807, King George III of Britain signed into law the Act for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, banning trading in enslaved people throughout the British Empire. In response to these new limitations to the transatlantic trade, and shifts in the agricultural economy, the U.S. Congress barred the importation of enslaved Africans into the United States in 1808. However, it left the internal or domestic trade in enslaved Africans intact. Thus, the internal trade took on a new importance as the slaveholding states of the Old South, e.g., Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, recognized that holding large numbers of imported enslaved Africans in reserve was too expensive. Plantation owners desired the free labor but sought to locally produce it rather than import it from continental Africa. As the transatlantic African slave trade diminished, an abominable new trade emerged in the Americas. In the United States, the internal slave trade was centered in the state of Virginia. At this time, the large agricultural concerns shifted to the New South, e.g., Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. I underline areas where I have ancestry based upon records. As this transition intensified, Richmond, Virginia became a central slave market that facilitated the interstate slave trade. Planters in the Old South chose to breed and sell enslaved Africans and African Americans as a commodity rather than freeing them. This domestic slave trade, also known as the Second Middle Passage, and the interregional slave trade made enslaved Africans of the Chesapeake Bay the primary targets of this new strategy. The main African ethnic groups of this region were the Igbo and Igbo-related peoples from what is now modern Nigeria. These groups disproportionately bore the brunt of this cruel and inhumane activity, yet it is their lineages now that are so abundantly represented among African North Americans. The state of Virginia was the center of the domestic internal slave trade, was the prime site for the breeding colonies established to increase the numbers of the enslaved without incurring the problems associated with transport on the high seas and possible intervention by the British Royal Navy and renegade pirates. Seven 127,754 ancestry DNA members. You and all members of this community are linked through shared ancestors. You probably have family who lived in this area for years and maybe still do. Most African Americans in this community can trace their ancestry back to West Africa in present-day Republic of Cameroon, the Republic of the Congo, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Benin, and Togo. Over a 200-year period, many were enslaved and brought to Virginia to work on tobacco farms, while early Virginia plantations were concentrated on the coastal plains. Slave-owning planters gradually moved westward in search of new opportunities, shifting populations of enslaved people inland. Life for both free and enslaved black Virginians grew more difficult as race-based laws restricted their social, political, and economic rights. You can see this here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. In the 19th century, this community was split in three. Many remained in Virginia. Others were taken west as white settlers poured into Tennessee and Kentucky. Another portion found themselves heading further and further south as cotton planters moved into indigenous lands in Georgia and Alabama. This is Igboland, a map of Igboland. This is one of the people who DNA match mine. She made a video on YouTube where she's discussed her results and finding that she had Black American relatives. Both of her parents were born in Nigeria. These are DNA matches I found using something called GEDmatch. Ordinarily, you would see a kit number and an email, but I scratched that out. This number represents how similar, or I should say a measurement known as centimorgans of DNA genetic relatedness. It's not very big, but these are distant relatives. Each of these names is an Igbo name. Njoku, Udoka, and Ulaku are each Igbo names. This migration V4 is just another way of saying 23andMe. This is someone who wrote a book, Judah Awakening. They believe that the Igbo are related to Israelites or descended from Israel. Their original name was Chinwe, but they changed it to Yahweh for religious reasons. This name here is not an Igbo name, it's an Ibani or Ija name, but they were a neighboring people and there was interaction and trade and intermarriage between the two. This is an Igbo person I matched, the person Obiojunwa, and this is their breakdown, their genetic breakdown. You see it adds up to 100% African. Mine does not because of interactions with Europeans in the Americas. Now this would be my complete, I think this is my complete updated results. So now you can see that I'm 40% Nigerian, 31% Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, 3% Benin and Togo. Interestingly enough, this Benin and Togo area is also associated with Nigeria, because you can see here this person who's Nigerian, they're 45%. 7% Mali, 5% Scotland. That hasn't changed between old and new estimates. 4% Ivory Coast and Ghana, 4% Senegal, 2% Sweden and Denmark. Before it was just Sweden. 1% Ireland. Previously there was no Ireland. 1% Wales, that's the same. 1% Indigenous Americas North, that's the same. 1% Southern Philippines, and it doesn't show it, but I was 1% Italian. That changed. This is the old estimate. Let's see if we can, compare the two. Benin and Togo, still 3%. Senegal, still 4%. England and Northwestern Europe, that's gone. Sweden has now become Sweden and Denmark. I'm still 2%. Indigenous Americas North, still 1%. Southern Philippines, still 1%. Mali has gone from 4% to 7%. Scotland, still 5%. Nigeria was 46%, now 40%. Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples is now 29%. I'm sorry, it was 29%, and that went up to 31%. Ivory Coast and Ghana is 2%, or was 2%, and now it's gone up 4%. There's been some changes, but overall not a whole lot of change. Okay, now these are 23andMe results. This has not updated, although now I'm waiting to see if it will update and show a tribe. Previously, it did not, and this is current, so currently it is not for me. So I'm 100% myself. That I'm Sub-Saharan African, 86.8%, West African, 70.4%, Nigerian, 45.4%, Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leonean, that's 12.7%, Senegambian and Guinean, 4.2%, broadly West African, 8.1%, Congolese and Southern East African, 16.1%, and that breaks down to Angolan and Congolese, 12.9%, Southern East African, 2.1%, broadly Congolese and Southern East African, 1.1%, Northern East African, 0.1%, with that being Sudanese, broadly Sub-Saharan African, 0.2%, European, I am 10.9% European, Northwestern European, 9.6%, British and Irish, 7.8%, French and German, 0.2%, broadly Northwest European, 1.6%, Southern European, 1% or 1.0%, Italian, 0.6%, Greek and Balkan, 0.2%, broadly Southern European, 0.3%, East Asian and Indigenous American, 1.8%, with that being Chinese and Southeast Asian, 1.1%. And that breaks down to Indonesian, Thai, Khmer, and Myanmar, 0.6%, Filipino and Austronesian, 0.5%. These percentages are due to my having Malagasy or Madagascan ancestry. And Indigenous American would be Native American. Then there's trace ancestry, which they haven't assigned to anything. They also say that I have recent ancestry in the Americas from Jamaica, which I can't exactly verify that being true or false, although I did find, just as I found distant Igbo ancestors or relatives, which shows ancestors on Ancestry DNA and through GEDmatch. I did find some Jamaican matches on Ancestry DNA, but we can't connect our family trees because I don't know how they're related. This is a breakdown again. This is to recap. Obiojunwa, Ekwim, Okeke, Ononye, Olisa, and Ebo. These are all 6 of the Igbo DNA matches I found on Ancestry. It's showing how much DNA we have. So 15 centimorgans, that's not centimeters, centimorgans, a measure of genetic relatedness. Unweighted shared DNA, 15 centimorgans. Our longest segment is 15 centimorgans. Unweighted is before Ancestry applies some is an algorithm or program called Timber, which is supposed to cut down your DNA to what they feel is within a genealogical time frame. With Equum, person whose last name is Equum, I share 11 centimorgans, with the longest segment also being 11 centimorgans. OKK, longest segment is 10 centimorgans. Our shared DNA, 9 centimorgans across one segment. Ononye, the longest segment, Andy and weighted are both 9. For Lisa, it's again 9. Most interesting to me is that for this person, Igbo, where it says 8 centimorgans across one segment, my unweighted shared DNA is 22 centimorgans, and longest segment is 22 centimorgans. So based upon this, she would be my closest Igbo relative. But because they're going by, I guess, within the genealogical time frame, it ends up being Obi Ajunwa. This may pretty much cover everything. One thing I wanted to ask anybody who's Igbo out there, what areas of Igboland are these particular names more or less common? If you could provide me that information, that would be most helpful. Thank you.